So in this problem, we have a 1.5 kilogram piece of clay. Let me see. That's going to be the mass of our first thing. 1.5 kilograms. And then we're going to have an initial velocity of this first thing, and that's going to be 7 meters per second. And then, let me move this over. We have a second mass, and that's going to be a 4 kilogram box. And that 4 kilogram box's initial velocity is 3 meters per second. And they're moving in the same direction, so you don't have to worry about making one a negative and one a positive or anything like that. And then, excuse me, we want to know the total momentum of the system before the collision. Okay, so that's going to be a conservation momentum. So we're going to have, this is basically going to be like our initial momentum, and it's going to be the initial momentum of the first guy and his initial velocity plus the initial momentum of the second thing and his, sorry, let me draw this better. This should be 0 because that's not the final velocity. Okay. And then, so now we can just like plug in our numbers. Okay, so let's see, we have 1.5 times 7. That's going to be 10.5. And then we have 4 times 3, which is 12. Probably should have known that. And that's going to give us 22.5. And the units for momentum are this. Okay. The next thing it says is it collides. They collide in an inelastic collision. And it says, what is the momentum after the collision? So this is kind of a tricky one, not because it requires a lot of work, but because it requires you to remember the conservation of momentum formula, which says that the initial momentum is the same as the final. And so that would mean that it's still going to be 22.5 kilogram meters per second. Okay, now part 3 wants to know the velocity of the objects after the collision. Since this is an inelastic collision, they're going to have the same velocity at the end as they did at the beginning. I mean, the two of them are going to stick together. So we're going to have like, we have our piece of clay and we have our box. They're both moving this way, right? That's before the collision. And then after, we have the box and the piece of clay is attached to the box and they're both moving off together. Okay, so in this case, we're going to have our momentum is equal to the mass of the first thing plus the mass of the second thing and the final. Okay, and we already know that our momentum is 22.5. So then we can do 1.5 plus 4 times our velocity. And that's going to give us 4.09 meters per second as our velocity. So that's going to be our final velocity after the collision.